Like, we might be the last generation before they start releasing, like, hey, we can extend your life by 20 years and they'll be a good 20 years, right? Like, I feel cheated because that's all I wanted. That was my only reason for being here is, oh, they can upload my brain and I'll get to be part of the internet. And now I might miss all that by a generation.
I don't know. Right now, Elon's probably figuring out how to upload your brain and turn you into a Bitcoin miner for him.
But that's
So
okay. That's okay.
great,
I'm
you live an
okay.
extra
Bring it
20
on.
years, but you're in serfdom to a tech billionaire.
That's okay. I'm fine.
No.
Yeah, I'm fine. I don't mind. I'll work because there's got to be some enjoyment.
But that's the thing is, you don't do you watch Severance?
I do. I love it.
So that is severance. That is there's no guarantee that your digital life doesn't become constant, unending bits and bytes of work output, and
I I
they don't worry about any kind of human experience. Because tech people don't understand human experience.
Musk is going to provide a bunch of electronic entertainment. Well,
There's zero evidence. He deserves zero benefit of
it's
the
like
doubt
the
for
no,
that.
because it's like the Matrix, right? They say the first versions we rejected it because so there'll be entertainment, right? They'll need to distract us while we're farming. So I'll be off doing other things. I believe.
There's zero evidence that that is what they will do.
Yeah, people. I believe.
No. Welcome to Acceptance Criteria, where we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of how software gets made and how we can all do a better job together. My name is Kevin Thomas Euland, and across the chat from me is Andrew Greener. Say hi, Andrew.
Hi, Andrew. We're also here to get deeper on the human elements. I could go on for an eternity about people and how they think about the process of building complex systems, and I can't think of two better people than Kevin and I to get into that.
Which is why we're lining up some guests in the new year. Oh, wow, you can tell how long ago I wrote this.
Oh, shit, yeah. Wow.
Which is why we need you to come to be a guest so it's not just the two of us. If you've got a topic you'd like to come discuss or rant about, drop us a note and we'll see if we can get you on a future episode. You can go to acceptancepod.com/guest and submit your ideas. Also, don't forget you can follow us on most apps. We're at AcceptancePod. We'll post links to show notes and any articles from the blog over there.
We're also building a community on Reddit at Acceptance Criteria, or you can find us on Discord. Once there, you'll find links to show notes and other artifacts you'll find on our blog. We promise to moderate the heck out of anything submitted to the team to keep it a nice little slice of the internet.
On this week's show, we'll be digging into some Reddit questions. What is your face? What are you doing?
When I discover like a new sound, like me breathing into the mic, yeah, I mean, I don't know, because I don't breathe through my nose generally. So,
You don't breathe through your nose? You're a mouth breather?
not when I'm recording, because it goes down, my mouth breath goes that way, but my nose breath goes down
Okay.
into the mic. So.
All right. Yeah, we can't let the gap between recording episodes go that long because otherwise
No.
my previously written intros are just wildly out of date. But before we get to all of that, let's take a short ad break and we'll be right back. Is success leaving you feeling empty rather than energized? Meet Jessica Mendez, executive and entrepreneur success coach, who helps successful women create achievement that actually feels fulfilling. Through her unique Clarity method, that's Clarity all caps, Jessica guides female executives and entrepreneurs to transform self-doubt into authentic confidence, creating success that energizes rather than drains. If you're ready to create success that feels as good as it looks, connect with Jessica Mendez on LinkedIn or visit www.limitlesspotentialcc.com, because your achievements should energize, not exhaust you. All right, welcome back. This is a segment we like to call User Stories, where we'll eventually, hopefully, be answering questions that you, the listener, send in. But for now, I think we found some interesting questions on Reddit that we can tackle. Yo Gabba Gab. No, see, I assumed it was from the TV show, which it probably is, but Yo Gabba 99. PMs using their own products. I've noticed many PMs don't regularly use their own products to understand products' friction points and the overall effectiveness in solving jobs to be done. Instead, they lean on customer feedback, UX, and other channels. They write strategy docs, they prioritize backlogs, they talk to customers, they manage stakeholders, but they don't get their hands dirty with the product. Have others seen this? And I thought this was interesting because it's hard being a product manager. I was just on a call with one of our engineering teams the other day, and they were like, oh yeah, we don't know why users do a bunch of weird things that we do, and we don't use use the software. And sometimes it's never great, but there are a bunch of reasons why, especially in the B2B space. Yeah, I'm not a person in a marketing department trying to figure out how to get the marketing campaign out the door. And so I use our software to make sure I know where everything is and that I know, this button feels weird when you click on it way over here on the side, whatever. Like there's stuff that I do that I is in the software, but it depends. There's a lot of cases where I am not on the hook for delivering the thing that my software delivers, and therefore I don't use it. And so there's other tools that you need to take advantage of. If you're in the B2C space, even, I don't know, do you need to do the type of phone-based photo editing that you're trying to offer an app to do? Are you a person who knows about the light adjustment, blah, 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 that you need to have your feature take care of? I'm not sure that I think this is a 100% hard requirement. I think product managers and engineers should be better about being in their own software and understanding where things are, how things work. But I don't know. Have you run into this?
Yeah, it's funny. It's a good question. I think about this one all the time. I've thought about it in terms of myself when, yeah, because most sectors I'm a techie, right? So most sectors I'm like, I like it as much as the other sectors. Fintech is
Right.
probably my favorite, but yeah, it's a constant question throughout my career. Like, should I be using the platform? It's like, well, I'm not in marketing. It's like, but does it matter? Like, you're gonna get a sense for the feel of the flow, and
Yes,
you will find the
absolutely.
nuances. Like, why do they build workflows this way, and why can't I copy and paste the workflow? And then quite often, I do get good answers from products. Like customers would never do that, right? Like so,
Right.
but I think about it all the time because there are times when I'm not using the platform, and that is usually because it's just too much hassle, right? Like access, like broken architecture, not great platform. I got to jump through hoops to get access, not stable. Then I generally avoid it because I'm like, it's just not worth. Like, if it's this bad to get in, how bad is it when I use it, right? So there are
But you would
times.
hope you are prioritizing to fix a bunch of those
No,
things
no,
because
no,
your
I know.
clients are possibly facing them too.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But hopefully, when something's so bad that I won't even log in, like the fix is that it's going away, right? And that doesn't happen very often, but there are platforms where I've been like, "This is so bad, like
Right.
it has to go away." But yeah, it's a good question. I thought about it a lot for almost 3 decades now. Like, should I be using the platform? Should I be using the
Right.
tools? And I have observed places where there was stability and good platforms where people still didn't use it, and that's often where I'd split the pack and say, "Yeah, you really need to be using it, right? Like, there's
Right.
no excuse not to be using it."
And there's a difference between, do you know how to use the platform? Have you gone through the training? Have you gone through the
Yeah,
exercises? Could you launch, do whatever the basic workflow is of the system versus are you in there every day using it 3 hours a day like a user actually is? There's a distinction there, right?
yeah,
And I think that's why you do have to rely on customer feedback and UX and other channels of people who are listening to the people who are in there 8 hours a day if you're B2B. And if you're B2C, that's also tricky, right? Like you should be doing surveys. You should be trying to find ways to get feedback from people because the other part of this also is this is why good QA finds the weird things you wouldn't run
that
into. A good QA person is going to try to type in the backslash and the asterisk and the dollar sign into the text box. You wouldn't have ever thought to do that. And that's the weird thing that's going to happen when the client opens the spreadsheet that has the weird formatting error and tries to paste that into your product and that breaks everything. It doesn't matter if you used your software 4 days a week. You wouldn't be the person who actually is trying to accomplish the business outcome or the user outcome and get into these weird situations that cause those weird scenarios. So yeah, I would agree with you. You might go through the training and go through the standard exercises and realize, holy crap, why did we allow step 5 to be so manual and cumbersome? We absolutely should go away and learn from that and make it better. But you're also not the daily user, and the daily users are the ones encountering the weird scenarios and giving you the good feedback.
That's exactly, actually, you brought it up at the right time. That's exactly what I was thinking about. Like, there's QA, right, and there's testing, but applications are getting more complex. So the testing can actually be in the workflow that you've created inside of the platform. So the platform's stable, but now they're creating some kind of wacky business flow. And
Right.
I would expect somebody. I would not expect a QA engineer unless maybe you're like the kind of place where it's like, cool, we have a fake company and we built some workflows because products help us build like the right complexity of the workflows and stuff. So hopefully everybody in QA would have access. But I always feel like they test for functionality, but they're not getting into the complex. Hey, this is
Right.
the stage in marketing where there's four options and it's conditional, and that's where I think like a good product engineer in the platform is going to do a better job of the QA. So I do like that's how I would think too. Like, what happens if I copy and paste this URL into it? Does it open up a new session? Am I
Right.
authenticated? That's kind of how I like to be in the platform. Is yeah, doing like those QA tests that nobody would really ever think of in QA.
Right.
And if you don't get guys like me using their spare time to do that kind of stuff, you are missing out on some pretty good business roadmap testing, right?
Which is why sometimes the answer is you have to be dependent on, hopefully you've tried to document as many of those scenarios as possible for yourself and your QA and everybody internally who's testing. But also sometimes you just have to know that we have 142 possible outcomes to this workflow. We tested the 30 most common of them. And now we got to listen for user feedback and clients telling us when they tried to do this thing with a text message followed by the post to Meta, followed by the TikTok video. And that's the 3 steps that don't work because we didn't think someone would do that. And you got to be open to that. So this is where like my answer is yes, of course you should, but also you can't possibly beat yourself up over having not done every single scenario that user experience allowed you to do. I don't know. This is all of our answers I feel like on this podcast sometimes are, here's a good framework that you should follow, and then you have to be adaptable. You have to figure out what's going to come in front of you. You have no way of predicting everything, so just make sure you're ready for what happens in those situations.
Yeah, I think it's also, and I think that's fine, right? Like it is super fluid and it's situation based, but I think it's also important to point out that the sort of behavior traits, right? Like I think of like engineers that we worked with in the past where they were the type to go through the platform and say,
Hmm.
oh no, I found a workaround for that. So it is kind of nice in a way that not just only for stability and testing but the production of like people who really are power users in your app, like, oh, I got around that by doing this, I created this
Right.
workflow and then I duplicated it. So I had 2 separate workflows and then I segmented the data and did it over 2 workflows. And it's a good workaround for 6 months, right?
Right.
It might even get you new business, right? But it needs to be fixed. I always love having people like that. And I can think of the names of people like
Yeah.
back in the
Yeah.
old days who would be like power users where you're like, man, if they didn't spend that time going through and really learning the platform, we wouldn't have these types of workarounds. The challenge is when you work at a company that then documents those workarounds because they have no
And make
intention of
them
fixing them.
productionalized. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I will say that is the benefit and the trap of having your own professional services, managed services, account team, whatever you call it. I really enjoy working at a company full of people who work, 2 rows of cubicles down from you in the in-office days, who were using your software on behalf of our clients. And so in a B2C space, you don't really get that opportunity unless you simply happen to love the app that you've made for people and you want to use it yourself. But it's really nice in the B2B space when you have an entire team of people right over across the hall from you using your software for clients and giving you that direct feedback. The problem is exactly what you just said, which is, okay, well, I know I can just expect Scott to keep doing that goofy thing every Thursday afternoon, and I don't need to spend the engineering time making it better. And you fall into the trap of now you've documented a bad process and made it your standard process rather than being the workaround. Because Scott can complain to you, but he's not going to go away. He's not going to churn. He's not going to be a lost piece of revenue if you don't fix it for him. So it is a tricky balancing act for sure, but really nice if you can get it.
I'm glad you used Scott because he was one of the names I was thinking of.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Anything else for this guy?
No, it's good. No, just I applaud the question. Sometimes the questions can feel like hard to answer, like you said. It's fluid. It's
Right.
really situation. It can change, like size of company, people. Even one individual can change the entire complex, right?
Yeah.
Complexion. But this one I like because I like the ones where I've asked myself the same question for a long
Right.
time because it's like, yeah, it is a fair question, right? Like,
Yeah.
and there are times it's like everything else in our industry too. Like I'm not even satisfied with my own answer because it always always feels less scientific than what it's supposed to be. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
we call it computer science, but there doesn't feel like a lot of science in software engineering more recently. And I feel like questions like that are the reason why there's not a lot of sciences. There's no set sort of recommendation or yeah, it's
Right.
just it's so fluid.
The answer is yes, you should know how to use your product up to a point.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
point is entirely dependent on a bunch of factors.
Yeah.
All right, I have no idea how to pronounce this username. Awafei, Awafey. Awafi?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know how you spell that. Pronounce that. Have you
Yeah.
ever decided not to solve a user need? Why? As product managers, we're wired to solve problems, but sometimes saying no or leaving a need unmet is the better call. Maybe solving it would create dependency, hurt long-term growth, or clash with your product's values. Have you faced a situation like this? What happened and how did you make the decision? Why am I asking? I work with aspiring PMs through certification programs and have noticed many have a strong urge to solve every user problem. While we talk about strategy and focus, I find it hard to get them to reflect deeply on when not to act. Real life examples could help. Genuinely, I think this maybe is the way most product people and engineers too should think about things. Is your base assumption should be I shouldn't solve this problem, and then you should go and justify why you should solve the problem. And that justification needs to be value to the business and engineering effort to actually get the solution. And yes, I am probably one of the worst of this because I'm this hybrid of engineer and product person. The joy and thrill of finding a cool and good solution to a problem is an important itch to scratch for people, and absolutely a thing that is a joyful part of the process and the job. And it's really fun and interesting to get into a whiteboarding session and all of you throw ideas against the wall and together you come up with the really cool thing that solves this problem. Is anyone going to pay for that solution? Is it actually going to increase your revenue? Is the effort that it's going to take to actually get there and deliver that worth the revenue that it's going to generate? Like, I think it's one of the hardest things that you've got to figure out is you sometimes need to it's not meant to be a downer. I'm not trying to tell you never solve interesting problems. Don't ever go into a room and brainstorm. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying when you do that, make sure you've done the research and you know that it's worth doing. Because absolutely my first instinct when I hear a user problem is to go spinning off and being like, ooh, and then you could upload the folder as a zip file and I could pull apart everything and automatically call the API 45 times for you. And then once I'm done that, I could build a really cool screen that lets you drag and drop all of the stuff to do. And then we'd call over here and save this and I'd save you so many hours. It's like, cool. Engineering would also take a month and a half to build that. And the month and a half and the 2 hours a week is not worth it. It's a really hard lesson to learn.
Yeah, I think that's what I think, my compliment to you is that
I'll Venmo you later.
you don't. I mean, maybe you do. Maybe internally you struggle with it, but I feel like the guidance for the technologists that I have worked with over time, you've been really honest about like that's just not something I hear in the industry as our customers wanting, right?
Right.
A less experienced or less confident product person can make the mistake of opening the door, and it might not be a bad thing. Like you create that one feature and nobody wants it, but do you know then to stop? Because and
Right.
that's the challenge for a lot of product guys is, well, I opened this door now. They'll use it when we get to the 10th feature, and
Right.
actually what you're really doing is you're taking engineers down a road of something that they will never use. So I've always felt much more confident working with a product guy of your level because you're telling me when the door is shut. Like customers don't want that. And I'm like,
Right.
good, because then in 2 weeks, when I hear a feature that is coming out of that, I know to be able to say the door is shut on that type of feature. However, you're bringing enough of a variation that maybe it fits somewhere else in the application. Let's go back to the product vision and see, right? But it's good. I like that because I think I've seen the worst situations have been where every single product guy is opening things and there's cans open everywhere. The
Right.
architecture, it hasn't quite mastered bringing data in yet, but it's already doing things on the export side and sending things here and sending things there. And
Right.
it's like, you don't even have enough resources because you've just opened everything that every product guy ever thought of, right? And there's
Right.
no one person who is willing. The downside of that person is being, not downside, but the risk for
No,
that person
it's
is
a
saying,
risk.
I'm putting my neck on the line that I understand this business enough to take us into the future. And if
Right.
I'm wrong,
Right.
I'm accountable, right?
Right.
I think you got to have people on the. You need people who are brave, who are able to say, customers don't want this. This is not where we're going.
Right. Well, and it's a tricky balancing act too, because sometimes the answer is the customer does want the completed meal
Yep.
and the customer does want everything. And so there's a version where we open 5 of the cans and
Yep.
a year later we've delivered them the really great meal. But what the good product and engineering partnership should be is I'm going to describe the meal to you. And then we're going to figure out whether we need to even open 3 of those cans, or it turns out that when you mix lemon and saffron together, it actually gives you a flavor pretty close to if we'd opened up 2 of the other cans that we didn't even need to open in the first place. And so like having that conversation about, okay, yes, we do want to get to this cool end state, but I can't afford the 10 steps to get to the end
Right.
state.
Yeah.
So what are the alternative brainstorming we could do to get us there? And the answer might be nothing, or the answer might be, oh, I didn't understand why you were asking us for step 1 when what you really wanted was step 10.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Also, you got to be careful, right? Because you don't want to stagnate your innovations too. Because it's like the customers don't want
Right.
this, but they should. Like if we
Right.
build this, we're changing the industry, right? They should want this, and when we explain it and through their pains, we translate that into features. We're going to be innovators. So yeah, it's a challenge, but you got to find, and not a knock on product, but there's maybe
Not
20.
enough people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe 20 in my entire career where I've been like, this is a product guy, right? Like I trust and can work with this person.
And the tricky, again, the everything, every single one of my answers is it's shades of gray, and you got to find the balance, which is absolutely there are cases where you understand the client's problem and you understand the client's desired outcome, and the solution to that is a thing that no one in the market does, and it's crazy and weird and different, and maybe is their outcome -5 but +50. And so, yes, it's a brand new thing. It is the iPhone, it is the automobile instead of a faster horse. There are absolutely those situations, but also way too many product people believe that their crappy idea is the next iPhone. And it's like, no, you've just invented a thing no one will ever pay you money for. I don't care how smart you think
Yeah.
it is. And that's the weird balancing act you got to find is, are you, especially in B2B, B2C, this is sometimes easier, but especially in B2B, you got to actually show them that you're solving enough of their problem, that maybe you're solving it in a way they've never seen before. Maybe you're solving it and introducing a new solution to a thing they didn't even realize was a problem that they had. But if you don't actually solve a thing that they're willing to pay you money for, it doesn't care how cool and innovative the new thing is. They still have the problem they have today, and they don't have the budget to give you for the new cool thing. So don't lose sight of that.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. But yeah, and I don't mean to sound harsh on product guys. I should probably
No, it's an
clarify.
industry full of a bunch of people who absolutely are doing good day-to-day work, but probably need to spend some time figuring out the strategy, or all they know how to do is strategy, and they shouldn't be in the day-to-day work, right? There's a bunch of people who are just at the wrong level.
Yes, that's
in
exactly the
product.
point I was going to make is when I say like 15 to 20 guys, I mean 50 to 20 guys who can at the strategic level talk to me about multi-year and
Sure.
and that is the challenge. What you just said is there's a lot of people thinking about the day-to-day, but at my level I really want to talk to the person who's like, yeah, they're thinking far out. Yeah.
Right. All right. Cockroach Plane 7842. Competing or copying, the feature battle with competitors. In the SaaS world, competing with rivals is a constant challenge. Unlike physical devices, software features are rarely patent protected, leaving the door wide open for others to quote unquote borrow or draw inspiration from your ideas, whatever you choose to call it. Take Instagram as a prime example. It overtook Snapchat by replicating its key features and integrating them seamlessly into its own platform. I don't know that that's the best example, by the way. Snapchat still does a ton of great business with a certain segment of the market, but anyway. So how do you navigate this battlefield? What strategies or approaches do you use to stay ahead in the face of intense competition? Let's share ideas and tactics. And I don't know, to me, I love being in a space with competition. I think it's really nice that I have competitors who've done their own market validation and market research, and there's a reason that they've decided to spend money building out a whole feature. I think there's plenty of times when I can look at somebody's UI screenshots and be like, oh, that's a really interesting way of structuring that data, structuring that requirement, and I can go and realize, yeah, actually, I know how I would take our unique sauce and do something better than that, but I don't know, take inspiration from where you can. I've also learned a ton of helpful information when I'm on sales calls. So my go-to example from probably a decade ago at this point is we had a competitor who we saw one of their screenshots from one of their press releases, and it still had a keyword, which was an old industry keyword on the UI. And so when you went and defined a new thing in their system, they were still using old words and old terminology. And I beat the crap out of them every sales call I was in. I'd say, oh, did did you see that release where they were talking about the new thing that they're doing? Isn't it weird that they still call their base target a list? Lists, is it 2006? What's going on? It was great that I could have that competitive information to know, oh, actually, these guys are still really behind the time on a core piece of their technology. And I might have only been half right. They might have had an entire other screen talking about their brand new innovative whatever. Didn't matter. When you're trying to win the deal and sell people on what you're doing, those are really helpful pieces of competitive information you can get out of it. So yeah, having competition is great actually, and can inspire you, can challenge you, and can also give you some shortcuts. I don't know.
No, it's
I
great. And
yeah.
I think of it exactly the same way. And what's nice about this conversation is you're thinking about it from the product side, and I'm thinking about it from the usability. Like a good example is this is why I always push Apache NiFi, and people, oh, why does he love Apache NiFi? And it is literally because as a data engineer, navigating in a browser is the worst thing you can do to me. If I'm
Mhm.
looking at a sample of the data, the next worst, the worst thing you can do now is say, cool, to verify that this sample data is actually getting munged in here correctly, I got to jump to another page and look at the business, the rules I've set up to munge this data. And now I'm like, wait a minute, did I have that column? Let me go back. Oh, it's up.
Uh-huh.
And all of the, to me, all of the cloud providers got that wrong. Google,
Right. Yep.
Microsoft, Amazon, they all got it wrong because they want me to have 13 different services that I turn on and configure and jump. And actually, I don't know if anybody, most cloud users will know this. When I'm in Amazon and I want to go look at one of my services, doesn't matter how many tabs I have open. It ain't liking the fact that I'm moving, but I
Uh-huh.
can't have 7 services open at once. I can't do that, right? And the reason why I push in that Apache NiFi is not just about Apache NiFi, it's about all products. It's like they built it and it just feels right for the guys who should be using it.
Sure.
And it's funny, I talked to one of those cloud service providers about a year ago, and they said we got it wrong and we're redoing our whole big data roadmap and all the tools and everything. And I'm like, how do you get that wrong? Like, there was precedence. There's platforms out there today that
Right.
work really well for data engineers. You just didn't look at them, or you thought you were going to be innovative. But the last
Yep.
thing I want to do as a data engineer is what you're making me do right now. How did you mess that up?
But that's the thing is that because somebody thought they were going to build the next iPhone or the next
Yeah.
automobile and thought their product vision for it was perfect. And it's like, no, actually, go look at the competition and figure out if what you're doing is too weird, too different. The other thing that's you also have to be mindful of is, are you trying to steal a bunch of your competitors' clients to come work on your software? Then the onboarding of those clients into your software is going to be harder for them if you don't have things that are familiar to them. And that's a tricky balancing act. You do want to be providing a unique value that people are willing to jump ship and come to you. But also, if they're about to spend 6 weeks relearning how to do their day-to-day task, that's a disincentive for them to want to go and come with you. So there's an interesting thing of just like, yes, do the innovative new thing, but also learn from the industry, learn what others are doing, and make sure you're not missing the boat and missing the thing that this other innovative competitor did. Brand new NiFi drag and drop interface that consolidates everything into one place. Why on earth did you not steal that and bake that into everything that you do as your foundation with all of your cool underlying tech?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
actually, the reason why the cloud service providers bother me is that's what they've been doing. They take an open source
Right.
project, they bastardize it and maybe improve it, then they abstract it so we just get the configuration values we need to make it run. That's what they've been doing for years. They've just been picking the wrong things for certain elements, right? Like the big
No,
data stuff.
AWS and Azure. I haven't been in GCP enough to know that this is true, but AWS and Azure, as far as I can tell, have like a UI template that they just paste everything into. Like this was only true a couple of years ago, so both of these might have gotten better. But going and trying to use Azure's capabilities to do any kind of machine learning modeling was insane because it was trying to stick a bunch of concepts into the existing UI templates that they already had, and it was just impossible to try to go and navigate around. It's like, did you guys not go and look at? I mean, at some point they ended up integrating MLflow, as far as I can tell. But like, you had a bunch of people who were trying to do this in Jupyter notebooks in a bunch of places that you chose to ignore, and you just decided to stick your data into your current UI framework. It was bad.
Yeah, it's funny. It's also it's nice being an architect too because sometimes I see software that was designed for one purpose, and I'm like, yeah, but actually, it's 90. It solves 90% of the problem over here.
Sure.
And then you get to explain why. And I saw this is a couple of companies back. Some kid had built it was just some rule, just some rule editor and JSON under the covers. And actually, what he built was exactly that. It was 90% of like, oh wow, actually, if I can productionize this and put it in the background, that's a great service for the workflow engine. And I love that. But yeah, I just think quite often like you know it too. Like at the most immature level, it's and no offense, boys, I love you to bits, but my kids, my older boys will call me, like, Dad, I got a great business idea, and then they'll be like. Honestly, guys, do you really think that the ski industry does not have an application that discusses weather conditions on the mountains in my region? And whatever it is, they bring me ideas, and I'm like, guys, a quick Google search, you'll see your competition,
Right.
you'll see the apps that are out there today. And then obviously, you and I work in the field, so we get the more mature versions of those same problems. But sometimes the result is the same. It's somebody who spent millions of dollars building something where you're like, did you
Yep.
research? Did you know what your
Yep.
competition was going to be like?
Well, and there's, I've been in companies where the entire idea was we all worked at company X. We hated that the technology was 10 years old and didn't adapt. So we went and just started this other thing that just did the technology correct from the start. And we're not there to innovate because we're in a market that has 40 competitors. And if you can get 2% of that market, you're sitting pretty for the next 10 years, just making a good chunk of money and moving on. There's a perfectly valid version of that, but you got to understand what the competition is. You got to understand what the appetite for that is in the market. And sometimes the only entry to the market is true innovation, true ways to dislodge existing people, because the existing people are cheap enough and good enough and have a big enough base that there is no one answer to this, but you better know what that market space looks like with the competition.
Yeah, I think I'd actually love to revisit this one in an episode just as a conversation by itself, because I think there's some really good examples of companies that people may not even have heard of because they tried to compete in and it's true, like there are a lot of companies, right, that you will never have heard of that tried to compete, often not bad ideas, but they're so far behind. They're going into a saturated industry. The customers that they're going after, it's sticky. We use that term all the time, right? Like, it's sticky.
Yep.
You may have a better solution, but they don't want to spend $5 million in the 3 years moving to your solution. So then what
Right.
else do you have to bring to the solution? Like a migration strategy. All of those sort of subjects start to come up, right? Because like cloud
Yep.
services will often do that. Like, hey, we got a migration pattern for you to move from our biggest competitors to here. But yeah, it's a really interesting conversation that you and I can look at from two different angles, right?
Yeah, that's a good call. All right, well, that's going to do it for us on this episode of Acceptance Criteria. To read articles that we've written on similar topics to the ones we talk about here, head over to the blog at acceptancepod.com. And a quick reminder, whether this is your first episode or you've been listening for a while, we wouldn't say no to your going and dropping 5 stars on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and leaving us a nice review. And if you want to leave us a bad review, remember the name of the podcast is My Brother, and Me. Also, tell your friends if you like the show and that they should check it out. Some of the best podcasts out there grow by word of mouth, and we'd much appreciate it.
And a friendly reminder that we are always interested in hearing questions directly from you, our listeners, especially for our segment User Stories. If you've got a scenario you'd like help with, whether it's working with a problematic engineer or product team member, trying to navigate the never-ending pitfalls with agile processes, or you just can't understand why your favorite app is evolving away from what drew you to it in the first place, we're here to talk you through it. You can send those questions to acceptancepod@gmail.com or submit them on the Discord in the User Stories channel, and we might be able to help you on a future episode. And we're happy to keep it anonymous so no one can trace it back to you if you end up shit-talking a coworker or something.
For now, I'm Kevin Thomas Euland, and you can find me on most apps at K Thomas Euland. That's ULLAND.
And I'm Andrew Greener, and you can find me on most apps at Criteria Greener. That's GREINER, and this has been Acceptance Criteria. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.